The spaceship Harmony's Edge flew through the stars toward Vorthak Prime. Jake stood at the window looking out at the strange purple and green lights of the Vorthak star system. Everything looked different here. Even the stars seemed to shine, with colors he had never seen before. "You're nervous," said Dr. Ryan Hayes as he walked up beside Jake. Ryan was a scientist who studied alien life forms. He had been chosen to help Jake understand Vorthak culture. "Wouldn't you be?" Jake replied. "I'm about to marry two women I've never met. They're not even human. What if they hate me? What if I do something wrong and make everything worse?" Ryan put a hand on Jake's shoulder. "The Vorthak are not like humans, but they're not monsters either. They have feelings just like us. They want peace too." Behind them, Commander Beth Santos was checking her weapon for the 10th time. Beth had been Jake's friend since they were kids. She had volunteered to come with him as his military guard, even though this was supposed to be a peaceful mission. "I still think this is crazy," Beth said. "No one should have to marry strangers to stop a war. There has to be another way." "Maybe," said Jake. "But this is the way we have. I won't let billions of people die just because I'm scared of getting married." Through the window, Vorthak Prime was getting bigger. Jake could see that it was not like Earth at all. Instead of brown and green land, the planet had huge cities that floated in the air. They were made of crystal and metal, and they glowed with soft blue light. Below the floating cities, purple forests covered the ground. "Beautiful," whispered Ryan. "Look at those cities. They must use anti-gravity technology to keep them in the sky." "Beautiful and deadly," added Beth. "Don't forget that this planet has enough weapons to destroy our entire solar system." The ship landed at a huge spaceport on the biggest floating city. As they walked down the ramp, Jake got his first close look at the Vorthak people. They were much taller than humans, maybe 7 feet on average. Their skin looked like it was made of tiny jewels that changed color as Jake watched. Instead of 2 arms, they had 4, and their faces were longer and thinner than human faces. A group of Vorthak was waiting for them. The one in front wore a golden robe and had silver patterns on her skin. She bowed slightly when she saw Jake. "Welcome to Vorthak Prime, Captain Morrison," she said in perfect English. "I am Royal Advisor Lethamira. I will take you to meet the princesses." As they walked through the city, Jake was amazed by everything he saw. The buildings seemed to be alive, with walls that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Strange plants grew everywhere, but they glowed with their own light instead of needing sunlight. The air smelled like flowers and something else he could not identify. "The Vorthak have a very old civilization," Lethamira explained as they walked. "We have been traveling between stars for over 5,000 years. We value honor, tradition, and mental strength above all else." "Mental strength?" Jake asked. "Yes. Vorthak can speak to each other with our minds. We can share thoughts and feelings without words. This is how we truly know each other." Jake felt worried. "I can't do that, I'm just human." "This is true," said Lethamira. "It will make the bonding more difficult, but not impossible." They arrived at a beautiful palace made of white crystal. Inside, the walls showed moving pictures of Vorthak history. Jake saw great battles, peaceful times, and ceremonies he did not understand. Everything was so different from Earth that he felt like he was in a dream. "The princesses are waiting in the Garden of First Meetings," Lethamira said. "This is where all important introductions happen." The garden was unlike anything on Earth. The trees had silver leaves that sang soft music when the wind touched them. Flowers bloomed in colors that seemed to shift and change. A small stream ran through the middle, but the water flowed upward instead of down. 2 Vorthak women stood near the stream. Jake knew immediately that these were the princesses. They wore elegant robes and had crowns made of what looked like living light on their heads. The first princess stepped forward. Her skin was a soft blue color with gold patterns. She was beautiful in a way that was completely alien but somehow still lovely to Jake's eyes. "I am Princess Vera Lynn," she said, bowing politely. "I welcome you to our world, Captain Morrison." Jake bowed back, trying to remember what Ryan had taught him about Vorthak manners. "Thank you, Your Highness. I'm honored to meet you." The second princess did not step forward. Her skin was darker blue, almost purple, and the patterns on her arms were bright red. Jake remembered that red meant anger in Vorthak culture. "And I am Princess Kirabeth," she said coldly. "I want you to know that I am not happy about this arrangement." Jake felt his face get hot. This was not going well already. "Kirabeth," said Viralyn sharply, "remember your manners." "Why should I?" Kirabeth replied. "This human insulted our grandmother. He refused to show proper respect. Now we must marry him to save face. It is humiliating." Jake took a deep breath. He had expected this kind of reaction. "You're right," he said to Kirabeth. "I did insult your grandmother, but I did it because I could not dishonor my own people by calling them worthless. Would you have done differently if someone asked you to say that the Vorthak were nothing but insects?" Kirabeth's skin flickered from red to orange. Jake hoped that was a good sign. "Perhaps not," she admitted, "but you are still an alien. How can we bond with someone who cannot even hear our thoughts?" Viralyn moved closer to Jake. "May I?" she asked, reaching out with one of her 4 hands. Jake nodded, not sure what she was going to do. Viralyn placed her hand on his forehead. Suddenly, Jake felt something strange in his mind. It was like hearing music, but not with his ears. For just a moment, he could sense Viralyn's thoughts. She was curious about him, and a little bit afraid, but not angry. "Interesting," Viralyn said, pulling her hand away. "You have a very strong mind, Captain Morrison. Stronger than I expected from a human." "What did you see?" Jake asked. "I saw that you were truly sorry for causing trouble between our peoples. I saw that you chose to come here not because you had to, but because you wanted to save lives. That is honorable." Kirabeth made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Sister, you are too trusting. How do we know he is not just a good liar?" Before Viralyn could answer, a new voice spoke from behind them. "Because I have looked deeper into his mind than either of you could." They all turned to see an ancient Vorthak woman walking into the garden. She was smaller than the others, and her skin was pale white with deep black patterns. But Jake could feel power radiating from her like heat from a fire. "Grandmother," both princesses said at the same time, bowing deeply. Jake realized he was looking at Supreme Matriarch Zethkara, the ruler of the entire Vorthak Empire, the woman he had insulted 6 months ago. "So," she said, looking at Jake with eyes that seemed to see right through him, "you are the human who thinks he is too good to bow to me." Jake's mouth was dry, but he managed to speak. "I am Jake Morrison, Your Majesty. I came here to make peace." "Did you?" Zethkara moved closer to him. "Or did you come here because you had no choice?" "Both," Jake said honestly. "I didn't want to come, but I'm here now, and I want to make this work." The Supreme Matriarch studied him for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled. "Good," she said. "Honesty is the first requirement for a Vorthak bonding. You have passed the first test, Jake Morrison." "There are more tests?" Jake asked. "Oh yes," said Zethkara. "Many more. The bonding ceremony has 3 parts, and each one is more difficult than the last. You must prove that you are worthy to join our family." Jake looked at the 2 princesses. Viralyn seemed encouraging, but Kirabeth still looked doubtful. "What happens if I fail?" he asked. "Then the bonding cannot take place," the Supreme Matriarch replied, "and your people will face our wrath." Jake felt the weight of billions of lives on his shoulders, but he also felt something else. Looking at Viralyn and Kirabeth, he realized they were not just alien princesses. They were people with hopes and fears, just like him. Maybe, if he was very lucky and very careful, he could find a way to make this strange marriage work for all of them. Jake Morrison stood in the middle of the huge courtroom. His hands were tied behind his back with special metal chains. The room was so big that his voice would echo if he spoke too loud. Above him, floating in the air, sat 12 judges from different planets. Each one looked completely different from the others. The main judge was a tall creature with green scales and yellow eyes. His name was Chief Justice Aldrin. He had been alive for over 300 years. Jake had heard that Aldrin was fair, but also very strict about the law. "Captain Jake Morrison of Earth," Aldrin said in a deep voice that filled the room. "You stand accused of breaking the sacred protocols during first contact with the Vorthak Empire. How do you answer?" Jake lifted his chin. He was not going to show fear, even though his heart was beating fast. "I did what I thought was right, Your Honor." A sound like angry buzzing came from the crowd behind him. There were hundreds of beings from different worlds watching the trial. Some had fur, some had scales, and some looked almost human. But Jake could feel their anger. They all thought he had made a terrible mistake. "The facts are clear," said another judge. "This one looked like a giant spider with silver skin. You refuse to bow down to Supreme Matriarch Zethkara. You refuse to say that humans are a lesser species. Because of this, the Vorthak Empire has declared war on all human worlds." Jake remembered that day 6 months ago. He had been sent to meet the Vorthak for the first time. The Vorthak were one of the most powerful groups in the galaxy. They controlled 50 star systems and had the strongest army anyone had ever seen. The meeting was supposed to be simple. Jake would bring gifts from Earth and sign a peace treaty. But when he arrived at their capital city, the Vorthak demanded something no one had told him about. They wanted him to get on his knees and say that humans were like insects compared to the mighty Vorthak. Jake could not do it. He thought about all the humans who had died fighting for freedom. He thought about his brother who had been killed defending a colony from space pirates. He could not dishonor their memory by calling his own species worthless, so he had said no. The Vorthak leaders became very angry. Their skin changed from blue to bright red, which Jake learned later meant they were furious. They threw him out of their palace and declared that humans were enemies of their empire. "The Vorthak have 60,000 warships," Chief Justice Aldrin continued. "They have weapons that can destroy entire planets. If they attack human space, billions of people will die. This court must find a way to stop this war before it begins." Jake's lawyer, a small blue woman named Advocate Mira, stood up. "Your Honor, my client was never told about this bowing ceremony. The Earth government did not know about this custom." "Ignorance is not an excuse," replied the spider-like judge. "Every species must learn the ways of others before making contact. This is why we have the sacred protocols." Jake felt hopeless. He had tried to do the right thing, but now it looked like his choice would cause a war. He thought about his parents back on Earth. He thought about his friends and all the innocent people who would suffer because of what he did. Chief Justice Aldrin was quiet for a long time. The courtroom was so silent that Jake could hear his own breathing. Finally, the old judge spoke. "This court has studied Vorthak law very carefully. We have found something interesting. There is one way to avoid this war. One way that has never been used before." Jake's heart jumped. Maybe there was hope after all. "According to ancient Vorthak tradition," Aldrin said, "a peace bond can be created through marriage. If Captain Morrison marries into the royal family, the insult will be forgiven. The war will be stopped." The courtroom erupted in noise. Some creatures were shouting. Others were making strange sounds that might have been laughing. Jake felt confused. Marriage? How could marriage stop a war? However, Aldrin continued, and the room became quiet again. "Supreme Matriarch Zethkara has 2 granddaughters. Vorthak custom says that both must be married to the same person to make the bond complete. Captain Morrison, this court orders you to marry Princess Verilyn and Princess Kirabeth of the Vorthak Empire." Jake felt like someone had hit him in the stomach. He could not breathe for a moment. Marriage to 2 alien princesses? He had never even seen a Vorthak before his mission. He knew almost nothing about their culture. "Your Honor," he said when he found his voice, I don't understand. How can I marry 2 people? And they're aliens. I don't even know if that's possible." "It is possible," said Aldrin. "Vorthak bonding ceremonies can join multiple beings together. The marriage will be real according to both human and Vorthak law. You will become a prince of their empire. In return, they will forgive the insult and make peace with humanity." Jake's mind was spinning. This was not what he had expected when he woke up this morning. He had thought he might be sentenced to prison or maybe even death. But marriage? What if I refuse? He asked. The courtroom became very quiet again. Chief Justice Aldrin's yellow eyes looked sad. Then this court will have no choice but to let the Vorthak have their war. 60,000 ships will attack human colonies. Billions will die. Is that what you want, Captain Morrison? Jake closed his eyes. He saw the faces of everyone he cared about. His parents, his sister Amy, his best friend from the military, Commander Beth Santos. He saw the children in the human colonies who would suffer if the Vorthak attacked. When he opened his eyes, he knew what he had to do. I accept, he said. I will marry the Vorthak princesses. Chief Justice Aldrin nodded slowly. The court appreciates your sacrifice, Captain Morrison. You will leave for Vorthak Prime tomorrow. The wedding ceremony must take place within 30 days or the peace offer will expire. As the guards led Jake away, he wondered what he had just agreed to. He was going to marry 2 alien women he had never met on a planet he had never seen, to save his entire species from war. Jake Morrison had always thought he was brave. Tomorrow he would find out just how brave he really was. Jake woke up in a room made entirely of smooth blue crystal. Sunlight came through the walls, making rainbow patterns on the floor. He had been on Vorthak Prime for 3 days now, and he was still getting used to how strange everything was. Soft chimes sounded, and part of the wall became transparent. Princess Viralyn stood outside wearing a simple white robe. Her skin was a peaceful green color this morning. It is time for the first trial, she said when Jake opened the door. Are you ready? Jake had been dreading this moment since he arrived. The trial of truth was supposed to be the easiest of the 3 tests, but he was still nervous about it. As ready as I can be, he said. They walked through the palace corridors to a round room with a high ceiling. Princess Kiribeth was already there, along with Supreme Matriarch Zethkara and several other important Vorthak. In the center of the room stood a tall crystal that glowed with soft white light. This is the crystal of memories, explained Zethkara. When you touch it, your deepest thoughts and memories will be shared with both princesses. They must know who you truly are before the bonding can begin. Jake stared at the crystal. The idea of sharing his private thoughts with anyone, especially 2 alien women he barely knew, made him feel sick. What if there are things I don't want to share, he asked. Then you fail the trial, said Kiribeth. And we all know what happens then. Viralyn gave her sister a sharp look. The crystal will only show memories that matter for the bonding. It will not reveal things that are private but unimportant. Jake took a deep breath and walked to the crystal. When he placed his hands on its smooth surface, the world around him disappeared. Suddenly, he was 5 years old again, playing in his backyard with his older brother Tony. Tony was teaching him how to throw a baseball. The secret is to aim for where you want the ball to go, not where it is now, Tony said. Young Jake missed the catch and the ball hit him in the nose. Instead of crying, he laughed and asked to try again. The memory faded, and Jake found himself watching another scene from his past. He was 18, standing at his brother's grave. Tony had been killed in a pirate attack on one of the outer colonies. Jake remembered how angry he had been, how much he wanted revenge, but his parents had talked him out of joining the military right away. Violence only creates more violence, his mother had said. If you want to honor Tony's memory, find a way to make peace instead of war. More memories flowed through the crystal. Jake saw himself in military school, learning how to fight but also how to negotiate. He saw his first assignment as a diplomat, where he had successfully prevented a war between 2 human colonies by getting them to talk instead of shoot. The crystal showed his thoughts during the meeting with the Vorthak 6 months ago. Jake relived the moment when they asked him to bow and call humans inferior. He felt again the anger and pride that made him refuse, but the crystal also showed something else. His regret afterward, when he realized his choice might lead to war. Finally, the crystal showed his thoughts from the past few days on Vorthak Prime. His fear about the marriage, yes, but also his growing curiosity about Viralyn and Kiribeth. Despite everything, he was starting to think they might actually be able to understand each other. When the vision ended, Jake found himself back in the crystal room. Both princesses were staring at him with expressions he could not read. "Interesting," said Vera Lynn softly. Her skin had turned a warm gold color. "You are not what I expected, Jake Morrison." "What did you see?" Jake asked. "I saw a man who loves his family more than himself," she replied. "I saw someone who chooses peace when he could choose war. I saw grief and anger, but also wisdom." Kirabeth was quiet for a long moment. Her skin was shifting between blue and purple, which Jake had learned meant she was thinking hard. "I saw the same things," she finally said. "But I also saw stubbornness and pride. These could be dangerous." "Perhaps," said Zeth Kara, "but they could also be strengths. Stubbornness can become determination. Pride can become self-respect. Jake Morrison, you have passed the first trial." Jake felt relieved, but he knew the hardest parts were still ahead. 2 weeks later, it was time for the second trial. Jake stood at the edge of what the Vorthak called the Great Mindscape. It looked like a huge valley filled with silver mist, but Jake knew it was not really a physical place. It was a realm of pure thought, where fears and dreams could become real. "The trial of courage requires you to face your deepest fears," Zeth Kara explained. "You must cross the mindscape and reach the crystal of bravery on the other side. But be warned, the journey will show you things you may not want to see." Jake looked at the two princesses. They would not be going with him into the mindscape, but they would be watching through their mental link to the crystal. "What if I get lost in there?" he asked. "Then you die," said Kirabeth bluntly. "The mindscape has killed many who were not strong enough." "Kirabeth," Vera Lynn scolded. Then she turned to Jake with a gentler expression. "You will not be completely alone. If you are in true danger, we can enter the mindscape to help you. But we can only do this once, and it would be very dangerous for us too." Jake nodded and stepped into the silver mist. Immediately, the world around him changed. He was standing on a battlefield covered with bodies. In the distance, he could see burning cities and destroyed spaceships. A voice whispered in his ear. "This is what will happen if you fail," the voice said. "Billions will die because you were not strong enough." Jake felt terror wash over him, but he forced himself to keep walking. This was just his fear talking. He could not let it control him. The scene changed. Now he was in a prison cell, and through the bars he could see Vera Lynn and Kirabeth being tortured by human soldiers. They were screaming his name, begging him to save them. "You brought them into this," the voice said. "They will suffer because of your choices." This was harder to ignore. Jake could feel tears on his face as he watched the princess's pain, but he reminded himself that this was not real. These were just fears, not facts. He kept walking through the mist. The visions became worse and worse. He saw his parents dying alone because he was trapped on an alien world. He saw himself growing old and lonely, never able to return to Earth. He saw the Vorthak laughing at him, calling him weak and pathetic. But the worst vision came last. Jake found himself standing in his childhood home, looking at a mirror. But the reflection was not his own face. Instead, he saw his brother Tony. "You took my place," Tony said sadly. "I died, so you got to live. But what have you done with that? Life? You're throwing it away on a marriage to aliens who will never really love you." Jake fell to his knees. This was his deepest fear, that he did not deserve to be alive when his brother was dead. That everything he had done since Tony's death was just a waste. But then he heard something that surprised him. It was Vera Lynn's voice, speaking directly into his mind. "Jake, that is not true. Your brother's death was not your fault. And you are not wasting your life. You are saving millions of lives." Then Kirabeth's voice joined hers. "You are stronger than you know, human. Do not let old pain defeat you now." Jake looked up at the vision of his brother. "You're right," he said. "I did get to live when you died. But I'm not going to waste that gift. I'm going to use my life to build something good." The vision of Tony smiled and faded away. The silver mist cleared and Jake found himself standing before a tall crystal that sparkled like a star. He reached out and touched the crystal of bravery. Immediately he felt a warm strength flow through his body. He had passed the second trial. When he returned to the real world, both princesses were waiting for him. Kirabeth's skin was bright orange, which he had learned meant surprise. "You should have died in there," she said. "The fears you faced were strong enough to destroy most minds." "But I didn't face them alone," Jake replied, looking at both sisters. "You helped me. Why?" Vera Lynn's skin turned a soft pink. "Because we are beginning to understand you, Jake Morrison, and perhaps care about you." Even Kirabeth's skin was turning a warmer color. "The bonding is working even without the ceremonies being complete. This is unusual." Supreme Matriarch Zeth Kara nodded approvingly. "You have one trial left, Jake Morrison. The trial of sacrifice. It will be the hardest of all." Jake looked at the two princesses who were slowly becoming more than just strangers to him. He was starting to care about them too, and that scared him almost as much as the mindscape had. But he was ready for whatever came next. He had made it this far, and he was not going to give up now. Too many lives depended on him succeeding, including his own. The final trial was supposed to take place at sunset. Jake stood in his crystal room, putting on the ceremonial robes that Vera Lynn had given him. They were made of a strange fabric that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. Tomorrow, if he passed this last test, he would officially become the husband of two alien princesses. Over the past 3 weeks, something unexpected had happened. Jake had started to actually like Vera Lynn and Kirabeth. Vera Lynn was incredibly smart and had a gentle sense of humor that reminded him of his sister back on Earth. Kirabeth was fierce and brave, but also surprisingly kind when she thought no one was looking. They were still very different from human women, but Jake was beginning to think that might not be a bad thing. A loud explosion shook the entire palace. Jake was thrown against the wall as the lights went out. In the distance, he could hear alarms blaring and voices shouting in the Vorthak language. His door burst open and Commander Beth Santos ran in, carrying her weapon. "Jake, we have to go now," she yelled. "The palace is under attack." "Attack? By who?" "General Carl Fisher and his rebel fleet. They've broken through the Vorthak defenses somehow. They're demanding that the Vorthak release you and stop this marriage." Jake felt his heart sink. General Fisher was a human military leader who believed that humanity should fight aliens, not make peace with them. Jake had hoped Fisher would stay out of this. "Where are the princesses?" Jake asked as they ran through the shaking corridors. "I don't know. The attack separated everyone." Beth grabbed his arm. "Jake, Fisher's people want to take you back to human space. They say you're being forced into this marriage against your will." Another explosion rocked the palace. Through a crystal window, Jake could see human warships firing at the floating city, but he could also see Vorthak ships fighting back with weapons that turned space bright purple. "I'm not being forced," Jake said. "I chose this." "But you could choose differently," Beth replied. "You could come with me right now. We could escape while everyone is distracted." Jake stopped running. "And let billions of people die in a war? No, Beth. I have to find Vera Lynn and Kirabeth." Before Beth could argue, a section of wall exploded inward. Human soldiers in combat armor burst through, led by a tall man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. General Fisher had found them. "Captain Morrison," Fisher said, pointing his weapon at Jake, "you're coming with us. This alien marriage is an insult to humanity." "It's also the only thing keeping our species alive," Jake replied. Fisher laughed harshly. "The Vorthak are not as strong as they pretend. We've been studying their technology. With the right tactics, we can defeat them." "At what cost? How many humans will die?" "As many as it takes to keep our freedom," Fisher said. "Now move, we're leaving." Jake was about to refuse when more explosions shook the palace. But these were different. They were coming from inside the building, not from the sky. Through their mental link training, Jake had learned to sense when Vorthak were in distress. Right now he could feel waves of panic and fear from somewhere deep in the palace. The Vorthak are fighting each other too, he realized out loud. Fisher smiled. "Yes. War Prince Thexmore has chosen this moment to try to overthrow his aunt. While the Vorthak are busy fighting among themselves, we're taking you home. Jake was forced to go with Fisher's soldiers, but his mind was racing. If both humans and Vorthak were fighting civil wars at the same time, the peace process would be destroyed completely. Worse, Vera Lynn and Kirabeth could be in terrible danger. They reached Fisher's ship, which had landed on one of the palace's outer platforms. As they walked up the ramp, Jake saw something that made his blood run cold. Princess Vera Lynn was already on board, unconscious and chained to a chair. "What did you do to her?" Jake demanded. "She's just sleeping," Fisher said. "We need her as a hostage to make sure the other Vorthak don't follow us." Jake felt rage like he had never experienced before. Without thinking, he lunged at Fisher, but the general was ready for him. Fisher's soldiers quickly grabbed Jake and tied his hands. "I understand you've developed feelings for these aliens," Fisher said as the ship took off. "But you'll get over it. Once you're back in human space, you'll remember which species you really belong to." Through the ship's windows, Jake could see the Vorthak capital city burning. Some of the floating platforms had fallen from the sky and crashed into the purple forest below. Vorthak and human ships were fighting all around them, turning the beautiful alien sky into a war zone. "Where is Princess Kirabeth?" Jake asked. "Still on the planet as far as we know," Fisher replied. "Fighting with the loyal Vorthak against her cousin's rebellion. If she's smart, she'll surrender to us when she realizes her sister is gone." The ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving Vorthak Prime behind. Jake stared at the unconscious Vera Lynn and felt something break inside his chest. In just 3 weeks, she had become important to him in a way he had never expected. Now she was a prisoner because of choices other people had made. "This won't work," he told Fisher. "Even if you get me back to Earth, the Vorthak will still demand revenge. You've just made everything worse." "Let them come," Fisher said. "We'll be ready for them." Jake closed his eyes and tried to think. There had to be a way to fix this disaster, but first he needed to wake up Vera Lynn and make sure she was all right. When Fisher's soldiers were not looking, Jake managed to scoot his chair closer to the princess. He could not touch her with his hands tied, but he remembered something. She had taught him about Vorthak mental communication. "Vera Lynn," he whispered, trying to push his thoughts toward her the way she had shown him. "Wake up, I'm here." The princess's eyes fluttered open. When she saw Jake, her skin turned a worried blue color. "Jake? What happened? Where are we?" "We're on a human ship," he said quietly. "General Fisher kidnapped both of us. He thinks he can use you as a hostage." Vera Lynn's skin turned red with anger. "And my sister? Still on Vorthak Prime. There's a civil war happening there, too. Your cousin Thexmore is trying to overthrow your grandmother." Vera Lynn closed her eyes and seemed to concentrate. Jake guessed she was trying to reach Kirabeth through their mental link. "I can barely sense her," she said after a moment. "She is alive, but in great danger. Thexmore's forces have surrounded the royal palace." Jake felt helpless. Everything he had worked for was falling apart. The peace between humans and Vorthak was destroyed. The people he cared about were in danger, and he was trapped on a ship with a madman who thought war was better than understanding. But then he remembered something Supreme Matriarch Zethkara had said during his trials. "Stubbornness can become determination. Pride can become self-respect." Jake was not going to give up. Somehow, he was going to escape from this ship, rescue Kirabeth, and stop both wars before they destroyed everything. He did not know how yet, but he would find a way. He had to, because somewhere along the way, this mission had stopped being just about saving humanity. It had become about saving the two remarkable women who had started to feel like family to him. "Vera Lynn," he whispered, "can you break these chains with your mental powers?" "Not these chains," she replied softly. "They are made of a metal that blocks psychic energy, but Jake, I can feel something else. Our bonding process was not complete, but it had already begun. I can sense your thoughts and feelings more clearly now. What does that mean?" It means we are connected even without the final ceremony. And if we are connected... Vera Lynn's skin began to glow with a faint golden light. Then perhaps we can do things that neither humans nor Vorthak can do alone. Jake felt a spark of hope. Maybe they were not as helpless as Fisher thought. Maybe the partial bonding they had achieved was about to become their greatest weapon. But first, they had to figure out how to use it. Jake concentrated harder than he ever had in his life. Vera Lynn had been teaching him how to use their mental connection, and now their lives depended on it. Through their bond, he could feel her thoughts mixing with his own. Now, she whispered. Together, they focused their combined mental energy on the electronic lock that held Jake's chains. It was not easy. Jake was still learning how to use Vorthak's psychic abilities, and Vera Lynn was weakened from the drugs Fisher's soldiers had given her. But slowly the lock began to spark and smoke. "What's happening back there?" one of the guards called out. "Nothing," Jake replied, trying to sound normal while the chains fell away from his wrists. The guard turned around just as Jake lunged forward and knocked him unconscious. Vera Lynn used her psychic powers to disable the second guard before he could sound an alarm. "We need to get to the ship's communication system," Jake said as he untied Vera Lynn's chains. "Can you contact your sister?" "I will try," Vera Lynn said. "But first we must deal with General Fisher." They moved quietly through the ship's corridors. Most of Fisher's soldiers were busy manning the weapons and engines, so the command deck was not heavily guarded. Jake and Vera Lynn managed to reach it without being seen. Fisher was standing at the main control panel talking to someone on the communication screen. Jake could see it was another human military officer. "The operation is going perfectly," Fisher was saying. "Morrison is in custody, and we have one of the alien princesses as a hostage. The Vorthak Civil War will keep them busy while we prepare our defenses." "What about the other princess?" the officer asked. "She'll either surrender or die with the rest of the Vorthak loyalists. Either way, this alien marriage nonsense is finished." Jake stepped out of the shadows. "I don't think so, General." Fisher spun around, his face red with anger. "How did you escape?" "I had help," Jake said. Vera Lynn appeared beside him, her skin glowing with psychic energy. Fisher reached for his weapon, but Vera Lynn was faster. With a gesture of her hand, she sent the general flying across the room. He hit the wall and fell unconscious. "Impressive," Jake said. "Thank you. Now let me try to reach Kirabeth." Vera Lynn placed her hands on the communication panel and closed her eyes. Jake watched as her skin shifted through different colors: blue for concentration, green for hope, red for worry. "I have her," Vera Lynn said suddenly, "but she is in great trouble." The communication screen flickered and changed. Instead of showing the human officer, it now displayed Princess Kirabeth. She was in what looked like a damaged throne room, fighting alongside a group of loyal Vorthak soldiers against attackers Jake could not see clearly. "Sister," Kirabeth called out when she saw Vera Lynn. "Where are you?" "Safe for now," Vera Lynn replied. "What is happening there?" "Thexmore has almost taken the palace. Grandmother is badly hurt. If we do not get help soon, the rebellion will succeed." Jake stepped closer to the screen. "Kirabeth, this is important. Are there any moderate Vorthak who oppose both Thexmore and the war with humans?" "Yes," she said, dodging some kind of energy blast. "War Commander Lethevia controls the Third Fleet. She thinks this whole conflict is madness, but she will not act without proof that peace is still possible." "Then we'll give her that proof," Jake said. He turned to Vera Lynn. "Can you extend our mental connection to reach other people?" "I do not know. It has never been tried before." "Well, now's a good time to experiment." Vera Lynn took Jake's hand and closed her eyes again. Jake felt their mental bond expand and strengthen. Through Vera Lynn, he could sense Kirabeth's thoughts and emotions even across the vast distance of space. But then something amazing happened. The connection kept growing. Suddenly, Jake could feel the minds of other Vorthak and humans throughout both fleets. He could sense their fear, their anger, their confusion about why they were fighting. "This is incredible," Vera Lynn gasped. I can feel everyone, humans and Vorthak alike. Then let's talk to them, Jake said. Using their expanded mental link, Jake and Vera Lynn began broadcasting their thoughts to both human and Vorthak ships. They showed their memories of the past 3 weeks, the trials, the growing understanding between species, the possibility of real peace. Captain Steve Parker of the human ship New Horizon was the first to respond. Captain Morrison, is that really you? We thought you were dead. I'm alive, Steve, and I'm asking you to stop fighting. The Vorthak aren't our enemies. But General Fisher said, General Fisher was wrong. These people want peace as much as we do. Through the mental link, Jake could feel Captain Parker's confusion and doubt. But he could also feel something else, hope. On the Vorthak side, War Commander Lethivia was having a similar reaction. Princess Vera Lynn, how are you speaking to my mind? Through a bond with the human Jake Morrison, Vera Lynn replied, We have learned to bridge the gap between our species. Feel what we feel. See what we have seen. Jake and Vera Lynn shared their memories with both commanders. They showed the beauty they had found in each other's cultures, the friendship that had grown between them, the love that was beginning to bloom. Slowly, other ships began to stop firing. Humans and Vorthak alike were experiencing what it felt like to truly understand a different species for the first time. But the peace was fragile. General Fisher had allies who were still fighting, and War Prince Thexmore was making one final assault on the royal palace. We need to get back to Vorthak Prime, Jake said. This connection won't last forever, and we need to stop Thexmore before he kills Supreme Matriarch Zeth Kara. Agreed, said Vera Lynn, but this ship is not fast enough. Then we'll get a faster one, Jake said with a grin. Steve, this is Jake Morrison. I need you to pick us up. Within an hour, Captain Parker's ship had intercepted Fisher's vessel. Jake and Vera Lynn transferred over, leaving Fisher's unconscious crew to be arrested by loyal human forces. The journey back to Vorthak Prime took 2 days. During that time, Jake and Vera Lynn worked with both fleets to establish a ceasefire. Not every ship agreed. Some humans and Vorthak were too angry to listen to reason. But enough did that the worst of the fighting stopped. When they arrived at the Vorthak homeworld, they found the capital city in ruins. Half of the floating platforms had crashed, and the beautiful crystal palace was badly damaged. But Kiribeth and the loyal forces were still holding the throne room. Jake, Vera Lynn, and a mixed force of human and Vorthak volunteers landed at the palace. Together they fought their way through Thexmore's rebels to reach the throne room. They found Kiribeth, kneeling beside Supreme Matriarch Zeth Kara, who was lying on a simple bed. The ancient ruler was barely conscious, but her eyes lit up when she saw Jake and Vera Lynn. So, she whispered, you have found a way to complete the bonding without the ceremonies. Grandmother, save your strength, Kiribeth said. But Zeth Kara raised one frail hand. No, child, my time is ending. But before I go, I want to give you something. The Supreme Matriarch placed her hands on Jake's forehead, and then on both princesses. Jake felt a surge of power flow through him unlike anything he had experienced before. I give you my authority, Zeth Kara said. Rule well and bring peace to the galaxy. With those words, she closed her eyes and died peacefully. Jake felt tears on his face, even though he had only known the old matriarch for a few weeks. Through his bond with the princesses, he could feel their grief, but also their determination to honor their grandmother's wishes. The final battle with Thexmore was brief. When the rebel prince saw that Jake, Vera Lynn, and Kiribeth now had the authority of the Supreme Matriarch, most of his followers surrendered. Thexmore himself tried to escape, but was captured by War Commander Lethivia. In the days that followed, Jake found himself in an impossible position. He was officially a prince of the Vorthak Empire, married to both princesses according to their law, but he was also still a human, with responsibilities to his own species. The solution came from an unexpected source, the mental bond that connected. Jake, Vera Lynn, and Kiribeth had grown so strong that they could share their consciousness with others. Using this ability, they began teaching other humans and Vorthak how to communicate directly with each other, Within a year, the first Terran-Vorthak Council was established, with representatives from both species working together to solve problems. Jake Viralin and Kira Beth served as the first co-rulers, using their unique bond to help their peoples understand each other. 5 years later, Jake stood on the observation deck of New Unity Station, watching ships from dozens of different species dock at the massive spaceport. In his arms, he held his 6-month-old daughter, whose skin shifted between human pink and Vorthak blue depending on her mood. Vera Lynn and Kira Beth joined him at the window. Through their mental bond, Jake could feel their contentment and love. It had taken time, but they had truly become a family. "Do you ever regret it?" Vera Lynn asked. "Giving up your old life to be with us?" Jake looked at his wives and daughter, then out at the peaceful ships in the harbor. "Never," he said. "I lost one life, but I gained something better. I gained a future." Kira Beth smiled and took his hand. "And we gained something we never expected. We gained love." Through the great windows of the station, Jake could see Earth in the distance shining blue and white in the starlight. Someday, his daughter would visit that world and meet her human,